So, strategies. Strategies with Lenny. The primary strategy is, well, it's very simple for us to get down. The strategy itself is, there's a lot to it, but there's a particular diet. It's called the zone diet that Lenny's been following. You may or may not be familiar with it. It's one of these diets that's where what you have to pay attention to is the balance between proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. So, in modeling his ability to maintain a diet to control the type 2 diabetes, his primary strategy is to simply follow that diet, that zone diet. We don't need to, specify what it is. You just get the book if you want his primary strategy. That is the primary strategy. What's very interesting with Lenny is his secondary strategy. That is that what does he do when his diet is not working? What does he do when his blood is not regulated, he's not feeling energetic and conscious and has clarity of mind? So here's what he does. And this secondary strategy, there's a lot, I think, to learn just about how experience works. The first thing that he does when he realizes that, my blood isn't regulated, I'm not conscious and I'm not energetic, the first thing he does is he remembers being back in the hospital and just before and feels a mild panic. So what about that seems useful to you? How is that a useful first step? Yeah, it motivates with pain initially. Yeah, he goes back to being in the hospital. He really was in the hospital. That's not speculation. For instance, people will smoke, right? And everybody who smokes knows, it's not good for you. You get these lung diseases and so on. Everybody knows that. They know it's true, so on. But is it real to them? No, it's not real. That's something that, will happen in the future. Yes, they can make pictures of it, but is it real to them? No, it's not real to them. And so because it's not real to them, it has very little impact. It has very little emotional or motivational impact. Okay? But he really was in the hospital. He really did pass out. He really was feeling, just before then, he really was ill and feeling bad. So the first thing he does, by going back into that past, what he does is he recaptures for himself the reality of what can happen to him, and the unpleasantness of that. Now, he feels a mild panic. This is a signal emotion. Okay? He feels this mild panic. Now, how is it useful that it's mild panic? Why not panic? Wouldn't panic be better because it's stronger?
Well,
Panic can shut off thinking.
right.
When you panic, if it's too strong, you just go running away. I got to get out of here. I got to forget this. I got to do something else. You shuts off thinking, and you don't want that. He needs to be able now to address this situation. But feeling a mild panic, that's enough. There's enough juice in that to, ensure that he takes whatever steps he needs to take, right? Then he goes into the negative future. That is, he steps into that future where, he's blind, he's losing his penis, he's losing his feet, in order to make that real to him. But see, he does that after he's gone into the past of what's happened. You see? Oftentimes what people will do in order to motivate themselves is they'll have a negative future, but they'll just jump first into that negative future. But is it real? Has it happened? No. Is it real? And it's very difficult for it to be palpable, to embody it. So one of the brilliant things that Lenny does is, before going into the negative future, he first goes back into this real past where he really did have these unpleasant experiences. And that's what could happen again in his negative future. Now when he goes into that negative future, he's got something real experiences to bring into it, so it can be more affecting. Does that make sense? Okay. So after those first two steps, he's got a lot of motivation. I got to do something about this, right? Now he goes into the positive future. And he does two brilliant things here. First thing he does is he reminds himself, if I'm going to get there into that positive future, I need to follow the diet. That is, he reminds himself of that cause-effect relationship between, maintaining focus and discipline and having his blood regulated and consistent and getting into the future. So he reminds himself of this chain of cause effects. Okay? Brings that back into his awareness. And then he reminds himself, I am 1 or 2 steps or meals away from getting back on track. Now, what do you think about that? What's interesting about that in terms of maintaining your diet? It's within his grasp. Anybody can take one or two steps, make 1 or 2 meals in order to get back on track. So it's not a big deal to get back on track, as compared to what happens with a lot of folks when they're on diets, where they go off their diet for some reason. They're at a social gathering. Somebody's, have some cake, and you want it, and anyway, and you've got all the rationalizations because everybody's having cake, and so you go ahead and eat it, and then you have a second piece too because it was so good, and then you start thinking, well, I've broken my diet. I'm off my diet. I've broken my diet, so to hell with it. I'll start again next month. Yeah? You think so? The experience is one of as soon as you go off the track, you're all the way off the track. You've blown it. But I haven't blown it. I'm just 1 or 2 steps off the track. I just take 1 or 2 steps and I'm back on. And that to me is an absolutely brilliant piece, which I use all the time. I've used quite a bit.
Is that because his signal emotion is such a useful trigger? I mean, it's one that the timing of that trigger is now embedded in a place where he really is only 1 or 2 steps away.
Well, one of the reasons, it's a good point, one of the reasons that he can be only 1 or 2 steps or meals away from getting back on track is that his test is an ongoing one. So he doesn't have to wait till next week to find out, that he's way off. So he's not really way off. He can find out quickly, soon. Soon he can recognize that, he's off track. So he is only 1 or 2 steps from getting back on. Mm-hmm.
So would this work with someone who was way off track, so to speak, or up against it?
You mean with this particular statement, I'm only 1 or 2? Would it work with them? Yeah, in fact, it would, because it would work with them in the sense of what impact does it have on your subjective experience when you recognize, I'm only 1 or 2 steps away from being back on track. Even though if we step outside and go, in reality, this person isn't. In reality, this person's way off track. But if in their subjective experience they can go, I'm only 1 or 2 steps off from being off track, what happens with them is they start going, they feel encouraged, I can do this, they're empowered, and they'll start doing what they need to do to get back on track. The reality is they're way off track. Who cares? We want them moving towards being on track. So it's a very powerful idea. It's a very powerful belief.
Because I'm just thinking if they are in denial about being way off track, then I'm wondering if they can accomplish step 1.
Well, if you're in denial about being way off track, you're not going to be asking that question in the first place.
Get that on camera. That's exactly right. If they're in denial, they're not going to be asking that question in the first place, and the question will not work, will not make sense to them. It won't go in. If you are able to interact with this person in such a way that that question does go in, and they can realize they are, at that point they no longer will be in denial. Or even a better way to put it is denial will become irrelevant.
Well, they're kind of going in and out of it,
Hmm.
like they sort of.
Well, that's therapy. Well, yeah. All right. So now he's recognized that he's got to do something about this. He's reestablished where it is he wants to go, that is the future he wants to have for himself. He's reminded himself that that requires him engaging his own discipline and focus in the diet to make that happen. He encourages himself and makes it into something that is not a big deal to take care of by remembering that he's only 1 or 2 steps or meals away from being back on track. And then he feels stronger, back in control. He feels stronger, back in control. And then the final thing he does is he goes back to the beginning of the diet and follows it strictly until he's back on track. Now, what's significant about going to the beginning of the diet and following it strictly? You know, things have gone awry. What's significant about doing that? Yes.
Reinforcing the habit.
Exactly, it's reinforcing the habit. I mean, whether it's true or not, one can assume that, well, if he's gone off track, if he's not energetic and feeling conscious and so on, that perhaps he wasn't following the diet quite the way he needed to. He'd forgotten some things, and so this is a way of reminding him and reinforcing him of exactly what he needs to be doing. Reinforcing that habit of what he needs to be doing to follow the diet. And it ensures that he does get back on track quickly. So instead of fooling around, by following it strictly, it ensures that, in fact, he is only a step or 2 away from getting back on track. He does get back on track quickly, which will be reinforcing. It supports and reinforces that he can do this. He can take care of himself, and that the diet is working.
I think there's maybe something else in there as well, because it's an external guide, isn't it? The diet is there, and follow the steps, that's it. It's there, it's described, it's, in that sense, it's easy, because he's supporting it within the belief.
Well, I never thought about that. I'll have to think about that. That may be so, that
He doesn't have
Yeah.
to really think about what to do.
he doesn't have to think about what to do. It's laid out for him. He just needs to do it, and do it strictly. Follow it strictly. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well,
Gene.
when you start something, the beginning of something, it's easier at the start of it as opposed to, again, consistently put that in line.
Yeah.
So I can always start over again at the beginning
Uh-huh.
and keep going.
Uh-huh. So, okay, yes, I agree. So it does. It reinforces that. That, in a sense, it takes you back to that experience of beginning the diet when it was fresh, new, exciting, and was having the biggest impact. And I agree with that. I think it can do that.
Can I go back to remembering about being back in the hospital?
Sure.
That part just before.
And just before. Mm-hmm.
And that is just before being in the hospital.
Right, during that period of time when he was ill and ill all the time and didn't know why. Yeah.
So basically you're saying that part just before it's all, I feel the mild panic, okay, but I still have time. I'm not in the hospital yet, so I have time to take big steps.
Well, he's feeling mild panic about what can happen to him. What can happen to him.
But it hasn't happened yet because I'm just before going
Right.
to the hospital. So
Right.
I start taking these steps here.
Right.
1 or 2 steps.
Right. Now's the time to do something about it. Okay, the emotion, sustaining emotion. He had, much like what we had with Shireen, you remember that she had 2 emotions? Well, with Eleni, it turned out there were 2 emotions as well. There simply wasn't a word that captured what he was feeling. It was more like there were these 2 emotions happening simultaneously. feeling powerful and feeling strong. And it was very interesting. What's the difference for you? So I want you to feel powerful and then feel strong and compare the two. What's the difference in the two of them in terms of how they affect your experience, how they affect your thinking, how they might support maintaining a diet? What's the differences? What's the difference in how they might support maintaining a diet? Yes, Rachel.
Powerful to me is more emotionally strong than physical, and those two.
So explain more. Powerful is more emotional. What do you mean by that?
Like empowered, like within myself, I know I can do this, and then there's the actual strength part.
The actual strength part. So how does the empowered part, how does that support maintaining the diet then? Okay, how does the strong strong part support maintaining the diet?
That if he's feeling strong, he knows that things are working to go back to the occasion for hunger.
Okay, does somebody else have a different idea? Yes, Jim, or another idea.
The strength seems to be over time. It's something that has legs, sort of.
Has legs.
Yeah. And power is something that you exhibit, like in a moment.
Exhibit in a
short
moment.
period.
That's closer to what his experience, what he was talking about, which is that when you're feeling powerful, it's generally powerful to make something happen. I can make something happen, right? In control.
I can do it.
Yeah, powerful. Strong is I can endure, I can carry something, I can endure something through a long period of time. So powerful is more about I can make something happen now. I can do what needs to be done. And strong is I can endure. I can withstand or hold up through time, which makes a lot of sense. Powerful means, he's got to make things happen to stay on this diet. But he's got to do it every day for the rest of his life. That's the burden he's got to carry. So he's going to need to be strong for that. So it makes a lot of sense that feeling powerful and feeling strong would support him maintaining this diet. Does that make sense, Jan? Okay, good. External behavior, you'll see there's only one thing that we thought really needed to be put in external behavior that was really jumped out as being significant. And that is that Lenny talks about the diet that he's on to maintain his diabetes. He talks about it a lot with other people. How does that relate to supportive of maintaining a diet to control diabetes? Yes, Jim. Oh, Jim.
Well, supportive. I mean, you're getting support, and you're sort of, as you're talking about it, you're sort of experiencing the positive thing of it inside.
Right. So those.
Also a failure, fear of failure. There's the push-pull there too.
You've got 1, 2, and 3. So one is there's support from others as you're telling other people about what you're doing. They will reinforce you. Oh, that's really great. We're proud of you. Or gosh, that must be a lot of work. That's amazing. You can do that, so that you get a lot of support for what you're doing. In the telling other people about what you're doing is reminding yourself of why you're doing it, what's important about it, how it works. So you're really reinforcing every element, every aspect of the staying on this diet. And another thing it does is you're creating this network of people around you who are expecting you to be on this diet and to stay with it. And they're going to be asking you about it.
Here's another check.
Yeah, well, it's another motivation. It's not going to be so wonderful to when they come and say, well, how are you doing on that diet? And you go, I stopped doing it and I'm back on the drugs. So it is supportive in terms of maintaining the diet. It may not be pleasant, but it's supportive in terms of the ability. Mike.
It strikes me that the structure of this piece itself is very much like the new behavior generator. In other words, when he's talking to somebody, here's where I was, this was a past condition I didn't like.
Mhm.
Here's how I've modified my behavior, and this is what the future will be like after I've modified it, or now that I have modified it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. But this is a fabulous. This piece here is a terrific little structural pattern that I've used many a time. You know, there's been many times where there's things that I wanted to do and or knew that I needed to do, and also knew that it was going to be very easy for me to give up on it or set it aside. And so I very specifically started talking to everybody I knew about it, everybody I knew, telling them what I was going to do and why and how I was going to do it, and engaged them in conversation. I talked with everybody about those things. And it really had a huge effect in terms of supporting me in maintaining that goal, going for that outcome. Yeah, Diane.
I don't know if this is true for him, but we're in the midst of the Tour de France right now, and Lance Armstrong does this model quite well. And one of the things that he says is he isn't doing it just for himself, because a lot of the people that he talks to are other people that are trying to do the same thing. So when he forgets about himself, he remembers how important it is to someone else.
Uh-huh.
Which
Sure.
is part of his strategy. Or like
I think that's exactly the same structure. You know, I am, in some sense, I am responsible to others. What I do has some relationship to other people, and I have some responsibility to others, and that is an important motivation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So one more piece, and then we'll be done here, and that's contributing factors. So for Lenny, the two things that came out of our conversation that seemed to be very supportive of being able to do this, although not necessary for it. One was understanding the mechanics of food in the body, how food and the body work together. And Lenny said that really helped him in that by understanding the chemistry, understanding how food actually worked in the body and the chemistry, it made the diet more real to him. It made it more meaningful and important. Instead of simply just following, eat these things because that's what you're supposed to do, he understood why he was eating those things and why he was following this diet. And so that made it more meaningful, something more worth following and devoting his energy to. Does that make sense? So, and finally, he celebrates the fact that he's a type 2 diabetic by taking a diet vacation day once in a while. So what do you think about that? What's great about that? Isn't that dangerous to take a day off from your diet and, maybe you'll fall off the wagon, Is it?
No, in his context, he's celebrating.
So what's that mean?
What it means is that he's happy and pleased with himself that he's able to maintain this diet and to be able to sort of retreat from it once periodically.
Yeah? Well, how is that useful to retreat from it? How does that support maintaining it?
Well, it's like when we go on vacation. We recreate, we recreate, we rest, relax, sort of do as we choose, and it empowers us to come back and be stronger, to rebuild again.
Uh-huh. Okay. I'm totally with you. You're just not quite saying the words I want you to say, but you're right. So by taking this, it does several things at one time. First of all, he's celebrating the fact that he's a type 2 diabetic and not a type 1 diabetic. Because if he was a type 1 diabetic, he'd probably be dead already. That's juvenile onset diabetes. But as a type 2 diabetes, adult onset diabetes, he's grateful that he can. If he had type 1 diabetes, he could not take a day off. ever. So that's one level of it. Another is that it's a lot of work. You know, he has to devote himself every meal, every day to following this diet. And this is, I think, what you were talking about. Anybody would get tired of doing that. It's a lot to carry every day. And what he does is he plans a relief. He gives himself a vacation from it, a relief, so that instead of simply at some point getting overwhelmed and going over threshold and just giving up on it or running away from it, he plans a relief and gives himself that relief. And that takes us to the third thing that I think is very significant about that, is that he is planning the relief. He intentionally goes off the diet for a day and then intentionally goes back on the diet. So what that means is, what that reinforces every time he does it, is that I'm in control. I'm powerful. I'm in control. I have control over my eating patterns and my diet. Do you guys see that? Rather than, he's not just falling off the wagon, which the message is, you have no control. He's choosing to do it, and then choosing to come back on. The message is, you have control. Yeah? Which I think is a pretty brilliant thing. Yeah. It is indeed. Yeah. All right, that's Lenny. Phew. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break. We'll take a real break this time, and we'll take a break. When we'll come back. I'll give you instructions, because what you're going to do after the break is you're going to get into groups of 4, and in a sense, you're going to do in your groups of 4 just what we all did together with Lenny. You're going to talk through the arrays you got from one another, and talk through about how the elements that you discovered, the elements of structure you discovered, how they relate to the ability. And you will learn a lot from doing that. Okay? So we'll do that. I'll give you more instructions about that after the break. Let's have